At first, the damage seemed minor, just a shredded cushion here, a broken lamp there. But over time, the incidents escalated. Max became unpredictable, especially when routines were disrupted or unfamiliar people entered the home. Once, he lashed out at a new babysitter, grabbing her wrist and refusing to let go until Lily intervened. Still, Robert insisted Max was just going through a phase, dismissing the warning signs as growing pains. Then came the day everything changed. It was a crisp autumn afternoon. Catherine was away on business, and Robert had left early for a meeting. In the city, Lily was home from school, playing in the living room while the latest babysitter, a college student named Emma, scrolled through her phone nearby. Max was in his enclosure, seemingly calm until he wasn't. Without warning, Max began pounding on the glass door that separated his space from the rest of the house. His eyes were wild, his screams echoing through the hallways. Before Emma could react, he managed to unlatch the enclosure door, something he had never done before. What followed was chaos. Max charged into the living room, knocking over furniture in a frenzy. Emma tried to protect Lily, but the chimp was too fast, too strong. He lunged at the girl he once considered his playmate, his behavior more animalistic than ever before. By the time paramedics arrived, the scene was horrifying. Lily was barely conscious, suffering from severe injuries. Max had to be subdued by animal control officers and was later euthanized. The tragedy shocked the quiet Pennsylvania community and ignited a national debate about exotic pets and the myth of domesticated primates. The Morgans, once envied for their unconventional family member, were now devastated and consumed by guilt. Lily survived, but her life would never be the same when left alone for too long. Max would act out. He once bit Catherine when she tried to take away a chocolate bar he'd stolen from the pantry. Another time, he threw a tantrum when Lily had friends over, forcing the playdate to end early. Robert brushed off the behavior, claiming Max was simply going through a rough patch, just like any teenager, he'd say with a chuckle. But Catherine wasn't convinced. She had been reading about chimpanzees, and what she found disturbed her. As they aged, their strength increased dramatically, and so did their unpredictability. The idea of placing Max in a sanctuary had crossed her mind more than once, but Robert wouldn't hear of it. To him, Max wasn't just a pet, he was family. On a crisp October morning in 2005, the Morgans were preparing to leave for an overnight business trip to New York City. They had arranged for Jessica Winters, a 23-year-old graduate student from the local university, to babysit Lily. Jessica was familiar to them. She had babysat for Lily several times. Beforehand, they trusted her completely, even around Max. She wasn't intimidated by animals and had even worked at a local wildlife center, which reassured Robert that everything would be fine. At the time, laws around owning exotic animals were vague and largely unregulated. Some states required permits for primates, but many had no restrictions at all, treating dangerous wild animals like harmless pets. It wasn't until horrifying incidents, like the one about to unfold, began making headlines that lawmakers finally started pushing for tighter regulations and outright bans. Before leaving, Catherine handed Jessica a detailed list of instructions. It included Lily's daily routine and was taped neatly to the refrigerator. Max, the note said, usually stayed in his enclosure while they were gone. However, if he seemed calm, he could be let inside for about an hour in the afternoon. Jessica, confident and calm, assured Catherine everything would be fine. She even said Max and she got along great. As the Morgans' car disappeared down the long gravel driveway, Jessica turned to Lily with a smile, suggesting they start with a movie marathon or bake cookies. But Lily's eyes drifted to Max's enclosure, visible through the large windows. The chimpanzee was watching them closely. His dark, intelligent eyes followed every move, silently waiting. Lily chose baking without hesitation. She mentioned that Max loved cookies. The morning passed peacefully: chocolate chip cookies, board games, and the first Harry Potter movie. But by early afternoon, something shifted. Max's hoots became louder, more agitated. There was a tension in the air that Jessica couldn't ignore. Lily shrugged it off, saying Max always got restless around this time. "My dad usually lets him in," she added. Jessica hesitated. Catherine's words rang in her mind. Only if he's calm was this calm. The screeches had stopped, but something still felt ... off. "Is this normal?" Jessica asked. "He's just bored," Lily replied with a smile. "He does this for attention." Jessica would soon learn how wrong that was, despite her instincts. She followed Lily to the back door. As they approached, Max fell unnaturally silent. He was already waiting by the entrance, unmoving, watching, calculating. "Come on," Lily urged, reaching for the handle. Jessica paused. Every part of her told her not to do it, but she opened the door. At first, everything seemed fine. After a brief hesitation, Jessica unlocked the door. Max entered calmly, gave Lily a gentle hug, and settled onto the couch with a picture book. He appeared relaxed, just another quiet afternoon. Feeling reassured, Jessica excused herself to use the bathroom upstairs. "You okay down here?" she asked. Lily nodded, seated beside Max. "We're just reading," she said casually. But Jessica had barely shut the bathroom door when a high-pitched scream tore through the house. Frozen for a heartbeat, she suddenly sprang into action, racing down the stairs 2 at a time. What she saw in the living room would haunt her forever. Max had changed completely. His fur bristled, his lips curled back in a terrifying grimace. He had Lily pinned to the floor, his massive hands gripping her arms. Blood poured from a fresh wound on her cheek. Jessica screamed and grabbed the nearest object, a lamp hand, hurled it at him. The lamp struck his back with a loud crack, causing Max to release Lily just long enough for her to scramble away. Max turned toward Jessica, letting out a guttural, primal roar that seemed to shake the walls. She shouted for Lily to run upstairs. "Lock yourself in your parents' room." As she stepped between them, heart pounding, Lily bolted toward the staircase. But Max was faster. With terrifying speed, he lunged and grabbed her by the hair, yanking her backwards so violently that her skull cracked against the hardwood floor. The sickening sound echoed through the house. Jessica, panicked and furious, snatched a fire poker from beside the fireplace and struck Max across the shoulder. He howled in pain, but instead of fleeing, he turned and charged her. The impact knocked Jessica off her feet. She hit the ground hard, the air exploding from her lungs. Struggling to breathe, she reached into her pocket, fumbled with trembling fingers, and somehow managed to dial 911. Max, meanwhile, had turned back to Lily, who now lay motionless at the foot of the stairs. Jessica, coughing and gasping, dropped the phone and tried to get up. She could hear Max dragging Lily across the floor. Then came the sounds that would haunt her forever. Wet, tearing noises, flesh and bone, ripped apart mixed with Max's feverish animal grunts. Staggering toward the kitchen, she grabbed a heavy crystal vase and inched forward, dread rising with each step. What she saw turned her stomach. Max was hunched over Lily's tiny body, his hands and face soaked in blood. The child was unrecognizable. Her small frame lay limp and still. Jessica vomited. Then, through her tears and nausea, she hurled the vase with every ounce of strength she had. It shattered against Max's back, sending shards of crystal in every direction. The chimp spun around, his eyes blazing with fury. He roared and charged. Jessica ran. She fumbled desperately with the front door lock. Behind her, Max's thunderous footsteps pounded the floor. Just as she yanked the door open, she felt him grab her from behind. His jaws clamped down on her shoulder, teeth ripping through muscle and tendon. The pain was searing white hot and blinding. Somehow, driven by pure survival, she slammed her elbow into his face and broke free. She stumbled outside, falling hard down the steps, then crawled across the gravel driveway, blood pouring from her torn shoulder. Behind her, Max stood in the doorway. For a brief, terrifying moment, he watched her, his massive silhouette framed by the warm light of the house. Then he turned and vanished back inside. Jessica dragged herself to the road before collapsing. A passing driver spotted her broken, bloodied body and called for help. By the time emergency responders arrived, Jessica had lost consciousness from the severe blood loss. Inside the Morgan home, first responders encountered a scene of unimaginable horror. Lily's body lay in the kitchen, brutally mutilated. Blood was splattered across the floor and walls. Max had retreated to his enclosure, but when officers approached, he charged without hesitation, forcing them to shoot him on sight. The Morgans returned home to a nightmare. Lily was gone. Their house, once filled with laughter and life, was now a sealed crime scene. The investigation revealed troubling signs. Max's behavior had grown increasingly aggressive in the weeks leading up to the attack. The housekeeper recalled how possessive he had become over Lily, sometimes even blocking others from getting near her. A local veterinarian had warned the Morgans and recommended medication to manage Max's escalating aggression, but Robert had dismissed the warning. Grief tore the family apart. Within a year, Robert and Catherine divorced. Unable to bear the memories, Robert moved away, severing ties with the life they once knew. Catherine, shattered but determined to find meaning in her loss, buried herself in community outreach, advocating for stricter laws on exotic pet ownership and raising awareness about the dangers of keeping wild animals in suburban homes. The tragedy of the Morgans became a cautionary tale. Chimpanzees, no matter how lovingly raised, are never truly tame. But Max wasn't an isolated case. Across the world, others would learn the same brutal truth. In the dense jungles of Central Africa, a seasoned wildlife photographer stepped too close to danger that his final shot would be his last. James Harrington, a renowned wildlife photographer from Montana, had spent over 25 years capturing animals in their natural environments across 6 continents. His work had graced the covers of National Wildlife, The Nature of the West, and other respected publications. At 48, James was known for his fearless approach and deep fascination with great apes, especially chimpanzees. His specialty was documenting the emotional range visible in their eyes, the striking, almost human-like expressions that captivated readers and scientists alike. In April 2019, James embarked on what he believed would be the crowning achievement of his career, a 3-month solo expedition into the remote Nong forest of Rwanda to document one of the most elusive chimpanzee communities ever studied. Though this particular troop had been observed by primatologists for years. High-quality photographic evidence of them in the wild was scarce. James intended to change that. Getting there, however, was a feat in itself. After flying into Kigali, he endured an 8-hour bone-rattling ride over rough, unpaved roads to reach Kitabi, a small village nestled on the edge of the vast rainforest. The 620-square-mile expanse of the Nong Forest was home to 13 primate species, including a notoriously territorial population of chimpanzees. James's arrival didn't go unnoticed. Foreign visitors were rare in Kitabi, and a lone American with high-end camera gear was even rarer. That evening, the village elder Mutara requested a meeting. Through a translator, Mutara offered a stern warning. "These chimpanzees," he said, "are not the playful creatures you see in documentaries. They are wild, they are dangerous, and they remember." James smiled politely, nodding. He respected the elder's wisdom, but he had spent years with wild apes. Surely, he thought, he could handle whatever lay ahead. He had no idea what was waiting for him in the trees. They were territorial, unpredictable, and capable of brutal violence. A villager had been attacked just 3 years earlier, losing an eye and several fingers. James listened to the warnings, but quietly dismissed them. He'd photographed great apes around the globe, gorillas in Uganda, orangutans in Borneo, chimps in Tanzania. He knew how to read their body language, how to keep a respectful distance, when to back off. To him, the villagers simply didn't understand his expertise. The next morning, he set out with a local guide named Emmanuel, a man who had grown up in Kitabi and knew the forest like the back of his hand. Emmanuel echoed Mutara's warning. The Nonwa chimps were different. They were wilder, less habituated to humans, and far more aggressive. For the first week, James followed protocol. He kept the recommended 80-foot distance, relying on telephoto lenses to capture the chimps. But the dense canopy above cast deep shadows, and the images lacked the intimacy he craved. These weren't the shots that would define his career. Frustration gnawed at him. He needed to get closer. On the 10th day, James told Emmanuel they were going deeper toward a rarely observed group led by a notorious alpha male named Kaga. Emmanuel hesitated. That group was unpredictable, volatile, but James had made up his mind. Reluctantly, Emmanuel agreed. They set out before dawn, hiking 3 grueling hours through thick vegetation. The humidity was suffocating, and James's clothes were soaked with sweat. But his excitement mounted as the forest came alive with distant chimpanzee calls. By mid-morning, they found them. About 20 chimps were scattered through a small clearing and nearby trees. Some groomed one another, others foraged for fruit, while a few juveniles chased each other across the lower branches. At the far edge of the clearing sat Kogo the alpha. He was massive, with a silver-flecked back and a scarred face that bore the history of countless battles. Emmanuel whispered they should remain at the forest's edge, observing from a safe distance. James nodded, but his eyes were glued to his viewfinder. The light was perfect dappled rays filtered through the canopy, illuminating the chimps in warm gold. Their expressions came alive. He could see the emotion in their eyes, the subtle gestures, the intricate social cues. But it wasn't enough. He needed more. While Emmanuel was distracted watching a mother chimp cradle her infant, James inched forward, slowly, quietly. Every step closer brought him deeper into danger, and closer to what he hoped would be a career-defining shot. He was now just 15 feet from Kaga, half the recommended distance. Through his lens, He could see every detail, the intelligent gaze, the tension in the brows, the muscles coiled beneath the fur. James's finger hovered over the shutter button. Just a few more shots. Then he'd retreat. But then Kaga's head snapped up there. Eyes locked through the lens. Something shifted in the chimp's expression, a flicker of recognition, ... Then fury, his hair bristled. He rose to his full height, nearly 5 feet tall, but with the strength of several grown men. Emmanuel's voice rang out from the trees, urgent and panicked. "James, back away." Slowly, but it was too late. Kaga let out a piercing scream that echoed through the treetops, scattering birds into the sky. The other chimps froze, their playfulness gone, replaced by sharp, alert tension. James tried to back away, but his foot caught on a root. He stumbled his $10,000. Camera slammed into the ground. That moment of vulnerability was all Kaga needed. The alpha charged, covering the distance in seconds. Amara stayed, swinging her blade again and again, trying to reach Naya, whose cries were growing fainter. But the chimps were relentless, teeth bared, eyes wild. Mosey was in the center of it all, directing the assault like a general. Amara was bleeding, now clawed across the back, her shoulder bitten, her vision blurred with tears and pain, but somehow she managed to grab Naya's hand and pull her free. The two stumbled to their feet and began to run, following the remaining women into the forest trail. They didn't stop until they saw the huts of Maso rising through the trees. Behind them, the chimps didn't give chase. They had made their point. The village erupted into chaos when the women returned, bloodied and crying. 2 were missing. 1 would later be found alive, but badly wounded. The other, just 19 years old, was found the next day, her body torn and mutilated, hidden beneath leaves. The incident made international headlines. Wildlife officials arrived days later, promising tighter patrols and barriers. But the villagers had already made up their minds. The balance was broken. Mosey and his troop were no longer neighbors. They were enemies. Amara recovered physically, but nightmares plagued her. She left Maso with her children months later, moving to the city, never to return. Her husband, Tybone, remained to work with conservationists, torn between loyalty to his people and the creatures he once admired. In the heart of the forest, the chimps remained, watching, waiting, and the villagers of Maso no longer sang songs of harmony with nature. They built fences, they locked their doors, and they taught their children what the world outside could truly be. A place of ancient rules, where even the most familiar faces of the wild could turn into monsters when the balance shifted. The attack on Amara wasn't random aggression. It was deliberate, premeditated. Learned behavior. The researchers called it predatory, a term that chilled the villagers to the bone. Under Mosey's leadership, the chimpanzees had begun to treat humans not as threats, not even as competitors, but as targets, as prey. The scientists documented signs of coordinated hunting behavior, similar to how wild chimps tracked and killed colobus monkeys. Mosey's troop, they concluded, had adapted these same strategies to stalk humans. What began as boundary testing, stealing food, entering the village perimeter, had evolved into something more ominous. Amara's death marked a threshold. The line between human and animal had blurred. The Ugandan government issued immediate evacuation orders for surrounding communities closest to the forest's edge. Conservation teams moved in to monitor Mosey's troop with drones and thermal imaging, while heavily armed wildlife rangers patrolled the borders to deter further chimpanzee incursions. But it came too late for many in Maso. The soul of the village was broken. Tyburn never recovered from his wife's death. He resigned from his work as a guide and stopped speaking to researchers. At night, he often walked to the edge of the village and sat silently, machete in hand, watching the forest, waiting. Nia left shortly after the funeral, taking amorous children with her to live with family in Kampala. She refused to speak about what she had witnessed. When asked, she would simply say, "They looked at us like we were nothing. They didn't kill out of instinct. They chose to." The story of Maso spread across East Africa and beyond. Documentaries, research papers, even podcasts tried to make sense of it. But among locals, it became something darker, cautionary tale whispered in marketplaces, repeated to children. At night, never look a chimp in the eyes. Never walk alone near the forest, and never forget what happened in Maso. Yet despite the fear, the curiosity of outsiders never waned. Foreign scientists and journalists still arrived, drawn by the allure of the story, by the haunting final photos of James Harrington. Mosey's face captured forever an image of raw power and intelligence, of something that seemed both close and impossibly distant from humanity. But what none of them understood was this: Mosey was no longer just a chimpanzee. He was a symbol of what happens when the wild pushes back, when the ancient rules are rewritten in blood, and when humanity, blind with confidence, forgets it is not alone. It was a coordinated hunter kind of behavior chimpanzees typically reserved for monkeys or small antelope. But this time, their prey had been human. In the aftermath of Amara's death, the Ugandan authorities took swift action. The people of Maso were relocated to a new settlement several kilometers away, beyond the known range of the chimpanzees. Their original village, once vibrant with life and tradition, was left abandoned, quietly reclaimed by the encroaching forest. Nature, indifferent to memory, erased the blood-soaked soil beneath fresh leaves. Tabon, now a widower with 5 children, eventually found work at a conservation center. He poured his grief into purpose, sharing his knowledge of the forest and its dangers with researchers. His insights helped form new protocols, measures aimed at preventing future tragedies, built on the lessons learned in Maso. Meanwhile, the chimpanzees remained in Kibale Forest. Their numbers began to decline, slowly, but steadily, as habitat loss continued to chip away at the edges of their world. But the behavior that had emerged under Mosey's reign, the boldness, the organized aggression, persisted long after his death. 7 years after the attack on Amara, Mosey was killed in a brutal territorial dispute with a neighboring troop. His reign ended not by human hands, but by the violent politics of the forest. Still, his legacy endured. The chimpanzees of Kibale became a case study among primatologists, one of the few documented communities that had systematically hunted humans. It shattered old assumptions about chimpanzee behavior and forced scientists to reconsider the boundaries of human-animal interaction to the outside world. It was a chilling anomaly, but for the former residents of Maso, it was a wound that never fully healed. The forest that had once fed them, healed them, cradled their generations, had turned hostile. It became a place of nightmares. Stories of the attack were passed down like sacred warnings. Parents taught their children to respect chimpanzees from a distance, not to fear them blindly, but to never mistake their intelligence and expression for gentleness. They were not like us. They only looked like us. What the people of Maso learned, and what they vowed never to forget, was this: the balance between human and wild is fragile. It can tip in a moment, and when it does, Coexistence can turn into carnage. Amara's story was not the only one. She was not the first. She would not be the last. Click here to discover 4 more horrifying true cases where humans were hunted and eaten by chimpanzees.